Hello everyone, I'm Greg Solomon. Now folks, I just recently watched Mr. Renetto's video, his reply to my video, and I see that Mr. Renetto has indicated that he has taken off the gloves, so to speak, and is apparently wanting to have a dust-up with me. And that's fine and dandy. I'm more than happy to accommodate Mr. Renetto. You see, the manly art of pugilism is one of a variety of subjects, of which I'm quite knowledgeable. And I'm more than happy to engage in a dust-up, a virtual dust-up online with Mr. Renetto. As a matter of fact, not only am I going to give Mr. Renetto a dust-up in this video, I'm going to give Renetto a tune-up. So folks, I want you to sit back, maybe perhaps go to your refrigerator and get an adult beverage. Sit back and enjoy the video. But to you, Mr. Renetto, you might want to buckle up, because this video might be a bumpy ride for you. So, okay, here we go. To start off with, Mr. Renetto, as I'm watching his video, he's riding down a street in his neighborhood on a senior trike, senior citizen trike. I'm sure you folks have seen those. Matter of fact, let me show you here. I could splice these into the video with a video editing app, but I prefer to do things organically, and I always have with my videos. So I'll just do it this way. Here's Mr. Renetto riding through his neighborhood on his senior citizen trike. Get a good look at him, folks. You can tell it's a trike because you can see the flag over here sticking up. You see that flag? I'm sure many of you have seen that type of flag. I've sometimes come upon senior citizens on side street, and I'm fine with it. Yeah, I'm fine. I don't blow my horn or flip them a bird or something like that. But I see them, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. They're riding down the road, pedaling that trike, you know. They're pedaling down the road, and they got a basket in the back. They might have a package from Walgreens, or perhaps a quart of milk and a loaf of bread in the basket. They always have baskets in the back of those trikes. And then they have a flag up. And granted, it's enough to make a preacher cuss when you get behind one of them, but you know, you get around them. I give them a little leeway. I realize that they're, senior citizens. The thing is, Renetto, he fits right in to that category, even though he's, well, if memory serves me correct, and it usually does, Mr. Renetto is in his mid-50s, and yet he appears to be about 70 years old. Now, that's the main thing that caught my attention when I first saw his video about a week ago, is how rapidly he had aged, and I mean aged beyond his years. You know, I get a yearly physical every year, and a couple years ago I went to the doctor, and the doctor came in after everything was done. I had a follow-up visit, get the results of all my tests and everything. Of course, I'm a fine, upstanding physical specimen. As I've said before, I have the genetics of Keith Richards. It's just luck of the draw. It's just the way it is. In my physician, they gave me the physical exam. I said, well, Doc, how's everything look? He said, well, Greg, he said, everything looks great. He said, the thing is, he said, there's two kinds of ages. I mean, people don't realize this. There's a biological age and there's a chronological age. And oftentimes, due to genetics, those two things don't add up. Sometimes the biological age is older than the chronological age, and sometimes vice versa. The biological age is younger than the chronological age. And my doctor told me on that particular day, after that particular physical exam during that week, he said, you seem to have a biological age about a dozen years younger than your chronological age. Well, of course, that's good news. That's something you want to hear. He said, I see people come in that are 40 years old that don't have the numbers that you have on your tests, that don't have the physique that you have, and are not blessed with the type of good fortune as far as good health goes. And I said, well, Doc, that's very good to hear. Thank you very much. This always stuck in my mind, a biological age and a chronological age. Well, now I know that Mr. Renetto's chronological age is about in the mid-50s. As I said before, if memory serves me correct, and it usually does. Now, I've never met Mr. Renetto in person, never have, but I've been out here on YouTube since, I don't know, around 2005. And so I've known him virtually online since around that time. And I can tell you that he has aged rapidly within the past 10 years. It's very obvious. I didn't mention that in the last video, but now that Mr. Renetto has indicated that he wants to take the gloves off and engage in a dust-up, well, I'll just come out and say what I think. I mean, I didn't mention it before, but I was shocked when I saw his video, how elderly he looked. And now I see he's riding a senior citizen trike. Well, I mean, he fits right in. Here, let me show you another picture here of Mr. Renetto cruising on his senior citizen trike through the neighborhood. As he's cruising on his senior citizen trike, he's talking into his camera, talking about how good his genetics are and how young his genetics are keeping him, so he's able to attract younger babes. Yeah. Well, here's another picture of Mr. Renetto. Hey, can you see that pretty good? I don't want to overexpose it. I hope you can see that okay. Do you see him? Notice how his hair is snow white. Notice how the whiskers on his face are snow white also. This is a guy that's over 20 years younger than Mick Jagger. And he looks like an old man riding around on a senior citizen trike with a flag on the back of it. Probably coming back from Walgreens or something. And yet he wants to pretend like his genetics are somehow keeping him in a scenario where he's able to attract babes. And he got that term because he heard me in my video. I happened to see 1 or 2 videos of him where he had a couple of younger women in her 30s, which is no surprise. There's it's an odd thing, but then again, it isn't an odd thing. It's kind of a normal thing. There's a certain amount of women, younger women, who are, for one reason or another, I can basically bring it down to 2 reasons, but they're attracted to mature men instead of men in their age group. But getting back to Renetto's senior citizen trike, here's one of those trikes. Can you see this, folks? I'm gonna hold it and let the camera focus on it. Good. Can you see that? Can you see Grandpa Jones there riding on that trike? That's the kind of senior citizen trike that Renetto is riding on. The only difference is his flag is on the other side, on the opposite side. Now, if you take Renetto's picture and Grandpa Jones' picture, and you put them side by side, well, I mean, come on, folks. If you take Grandpa Jones' glasses and put an identical pair on Renetto, or vice versa, put a pair of Renetto's red glasses on Grandpa Jones, set Grandpa Jones's beard trimmer to about a number 2 guard, and trim him up to the, shear him to the short whiskers that Renetto has, and then give Renetto a old man's hat like Grandpa Jones is wearing, well, they'd be identical. It'd be very much, hardly any difference at all. And yet when I downloaded this generic image of Grandpa Jones, the caption said an octogenarian is riding his senior trike. Octogenarian, that means he's in his 80s. Renetto's in his mid-50s. I don't know how far in his 80s is, but let's give Renetto the benefit of the doubt and say Grandpa Jones is 80 years old. 80, let's say 55. We're talking 25 years difference. You give him the same glasses and the same hat. I mean, come on, folks. You got the same guy. Yeah, I don't see any indication of genetics Mr. Renetto's part at all. No, Mr. Renetto seems to be delusional. He seems to not understand what attracts younger women to more mature men, and there is a certain segment of women, and it's actually a pretty good amount, a pretty good percentage of women, younger women, who are attracted to mature men. And essentially it's for 2 reasons. Number one is, they see the hoary head, the hoary spelled H-O-A-R-Y, gray, it just means gray. They see the gray, and they see the age, the maturity, the years that have accumulated, and they're attracted to that because they discern from that they can receive good advice. They can receive good counsel from such a person. Such a person will know what to do. So if they were talking to you, if they're sitting in a room or across a kitchen table from you, and they tell you some problem they're having, or a couple of problems they're having, well, if they told a younger fella, well, maybe he might not be able to hit on the exact answer right away. But a guy that's been around the block a few times, a guy that's possessed of wisdom, and possibly has a high IQ level, that combination of things, and I'm not saying that Renetto has all 3 of those. He's older and he's mature, but I'm not saying he has all 3 of those qualities. But I'm just speaking hypothetically. So you get a young woman that's 30-something years old, and she has a couple problems, and a person who is mature, has wisdom, and a high IQ level, is able to give her sagely advice. And she can recognize that there's no ulterior motive involved in that advice. There's no subterfuge or undercurrent in that advice. The advice is given specifically to benefit her with no ulterior motive. And she recognizes that. And she says, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. Oh, that's great. And after a while, you'll hear her say, well, you're so smart. I love listening to you talk. You're just so smart. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But see, Renetto, he might have given some advice to these, there's two babes, two, and I will call them babes. I mean, I've seen them on the video. There's two. Not surprising at all. It's not because he has some superior genetics. He thinks Mr. Renetto, you're not going to compete with a guy that's 30 years old. Get that out of your head. That's not what it is. You can work out, you can do whatever you want, and you're not going to compete with a guy that's younger than you. Let me show you. Here's the beautiful actress Sophia Loren and her husband Carlo Ponti. Old enough to be her father. She's one of the most beautiful actresses that ever graced Hollywood. And she was with a guy that was old enough to be her father. There's Bo Derek with her Svengali husband, John Derek. Oh, and there's, regardless of what you think of her, Celine Dion. Take a look at her in the prime of her womanhood, in her 30s. Take a good close look at Celine Dion. See the old man in the sunglasses beside her? That's her husband. She's attracted to him from the time she was in her late teens. Yes. Now why? See, this is what Mr. Renetto doesn't understand, is why. The thing is, as I said, it's the advice. It's the maturity. They're partaking of something that they can't get elsewhere. And then number two, when it evolves into, when that relationship, not necessarily it's a relationship, a friendship, however you want to describe it, but when it evolves into the next stage, if you know what I mean. When the older guy experiences her, well, it's a whole different ball game at that age than it was when he was, let's say, 32. In other words, like that picture I just showed you of Celine Dion in the prime of young womanhood. I mean, skin is clear and tight. Everything is where it's supposed to be. There's, well, you know what I'm saying. And the guy is an old man. But you see, when that guy that's an old man, when he was 32 and he was with a woman that was 32, well, there was nothing out of the ordinary. It was just normal. It's just the way it is. But when a fella gets up into that age, and up into the advanced age where Renetto is, not just his chronological age, but even higher in his biological age, because he's not aging well at all, Renetto isn't. And Mr. Renetto, you're not aging well, believe me. You are aging rapidly. That's not a sign of good genetics. That's a sign of actually somewhat inferior genetics, to be at your age and be looking like an octogenarian that's riding on a senior citizen trike. But be that as it may. So when a fellow's 32 and he's with a woman that's 32, well, it just seems normal. There's nothing out of the ordinary. But when a fellow gets old enough to be that 32-year-old's father, and he's with a woman that age, it's a whole different ball game. Whole different ball game. And I'm sure Mr. Renetto can identify with that. When a person reaches a certain age, all of a sudden a 32-year-old woman it's something there's a whole different sense and depth of appreciation for that womanhood, that where before it seemed just normal, just what you would expect. Now it's the unexpected. It's like, they're like almost, and Mr. Renetto, I think you'll agree with me, almost in the domain of a young, lovely goddess, if you know what I'm saying. And the woman can sense that. She senses that appreciation. She senses that depth of appreciation. And she likes it. And in fact, is even flattered by it. So you see, Mr. Renetto had two of these young women, both of whom are in their 30s. And had he played his cards right, which any mature guy would have, it's not really a matter of playing your cards right, it's just a matter of doing what's right. You give her the proper advice. You can't help but appreciate her womanhood. That's just a natural consequence of your age versus her age. It's a whole different spectrum. When you're 50-something or even 60-something, you're with a woman that's in her 30s. Come on. It's way different than being in your 30s and with a woman in her 30s. But the giving the advice, there should be, Mr. Renetto, there should be nothing there. There should be no undercurrents there. If a young woman has some advice or has an issue or a problem, you should use your wisdom from the years that you've been around going through this thing called life, and from your maturity, and you should be able to give her a good answer, a wise answer. Answer where she says, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. How did you see that? And, well, I've just been around a few years, and I have a little bit of wisdom, and they like that, see? And they know that you're giving them advice that's specifically designed to help them, with no undercurrent of an ulterior motive. But folks, let me show you what Mr. Renetto did. And I didn't say in my other video, I noticed that he had attracted two, what I would refer to as babes, in their 30s. So about 25 years younger than him, chronologically, probably 35 years younger than him biologically at the rate he's aging. So Mr. Renetto should have been dispensing sagely advice with no ulterior motive. But let me show you the kind of advice he dispensed. And also, as I didn't mention in my other videos, he's no longer with those women. Neither one of them. Because both of them have kicked him to the curb. Kicked him to the curb. And I'm getting ready to show you why. I think this might have something to do with it. Instead of dispensing sagely and wise advice and giving them answers with no ulterior motives in the undercurrent, this is the kind of advice that Renetto gave one of them. She goes by the name of Cupcake. Appears to be 32, 33 years old. Cupcake. Mr. Renetto is about 55, pushing 70. And he has Cupcake in his home. And I'm sure had access to Cupcake's womanhood. See? But let me show you what Mr. Renetto did, what his idea is of dispensing advice. I'll show you by way of an instruction book. An instruction book that he gifted Cupcake with. Now I could just tell you the name of the instruction book, but I'm afraid if I paid lip service to the name of this particular instruction book, that I might be accused of moral turpitude. Thus, I'm going to show you a picture. Besides, as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words anyway. So people, take a look at the instruction book that Mr. Renetto gifted Cupcake with. Yeah, hold it up there. I want you to see that. I'm going to hold it real still. I want you to see what it says. Could you see that, folks? Is Mr. Renetto 55 years old, going on 70? My God, he looks like he's almost ready for a nursing home. He's got a woman here that's in her 30s. Instead of dispensing sagely advice, look what kind of an instruction book he's given her. Can you see that, folks? I hope you can. I mean, from what I'm seeing in the feed here that I'm getting back from my camera, I'm pretty sure that you can see it. And God only knows what Mr. Renetto is holding up. That's him holding up something in his hand. Right there. Yeah, some sort of a grotesque prop. Apparently so that Miss Cupcake can probably practice what she learns, what information she gleans from the instruction book that Mr. Renetto has given her. So people, I posit to you that it's no wonder that Mr. Renetto was kicked to the curb by Cupcake. That's not what she wanted. Cupcake's thinking to herself, my gosh, here's a guy I'm thinking he's a mature guy, can give me some mature advice and counsel. Well, you see what Mr. Renetto gives her. Thinking only of himself. Talk about an ulterior motive. Holy God, I mean, that's laying it right out in front. Yeah, that is despicable. So I don't blame her for kicking you to the curb, Mr. Renetto. And I was unaware why Mr. Renetto in the first place would even be able to have someone under his roof who goes by the name of Cupcake and is quite a bit younger than him, and able to gift her with such an instruction book. I'm thinking to myself, because I haven't been around in a while on YouTube, I'm thinking, well, my gosh, where in the heck is Mrs. Renetto? I'm sure Mrs. Renetto wouldn't approve of Mr. Renetto having a female friend over at the house named Cupcake, and whereupon he gifts her with this sort of sordid instruction book, a self-serving instruction book. But then as I watched a few more videos, I found out that not only has Cupcake and this other young female in her 30s kicked Renetto to the curb, but also Mrs. Well, I should say, the ex Mrs. Renetto, has also kicked him to the curb. So, what Mr. Renetto was left with is a senior trike, essentially, and some video memories of these women in their 30s. The ex Mrs. Renetto is apparently up in her home state. She kicked Mr. Renetto to the curb, and he headed down to Florida, currently living in a house that he doesn't own, doesn't pay rent on, and could actually be booted out of any minute, actually be kicked to the curb out of the house that he's staying in. But the ex Mrs. Renetto is living, well, I won't say what state it is. Some of you folks can look online. You can look at some of his earlier videos and see what state he was living in. It's a state up in the northern area of the United States. And from what I've gleaned from Mr. Renetto's videos, she is now going to nursing school, and good for her. I mean, she's probably a few years younger than Renetto, and definitely biologically younger, because I remember seeing her in videos that he posted a few years ago, and she looked a hell of a lot younger than him in those videos. So her biological age, I mean, she's aging at a much slower rate. And I'm not going to say what state she lives in. You can look at his older videos. You'll be able to find out very quickly what state she lives in. Or you can just text him and ask him. And he wouldn't care because she's kicked him to the curb. They're no longer an item. He's at the curb. And she's getting on with her own life and going to nursing school. Now, to some enterprising young guys who live up in that area, in the state where she lives, this could represent a good opportunity. That's the proper word. That's the best word. A good opportunity. You see, she's, what do the young fellas call it nowadays? Back in my day, it was like a Mrs. Robinson type woman. Nowadays the young fellas call such a woman a MILF. So I would say the ex Mrs. Renetto is indeed a MILF. MILF. So this is a good opportunity for a young fellow up there in that state in the north. I mean, she's going to, she's middle-aged. She's going to nursing school, which is rather late in life. She's kicked Renetto to the curb, so she's single. So right now, she needs a strong shoulder to lean on, a receptive and open ear to listen to her. Young men listening to me, hear what I'm saying. These are also pearls of wisdom dropping. I'm just stating the obvious. This represents a good opportunity for a young fella that lives up in that area. That's just a segue. I just wanted to throw that in there. Now, let me get to another item on Mr. Renetto's video. And he's riding his senior trike. Yeah, he's got his handlebars up like this, got his hands. They always squeak. The bikes always squeak for some reason, especially with senior trike. And he stopped at one time because this was so important, he wanted to stop so we could hear him good. And he's talking about Elon Musk And Mr. Renetto was telling us how important of a man Renetto is. He's a very important man. Because at one time, years ago, he was involved in some sort of a nebulous project in which he was helping to make the world a better place. With a woman named Esther Crawford. And he said to me, he said, "Oh, Greg, you know who Esther Crawford is?" "Well, yeah, yes, indeed I do. I've been out, as I said, YouTube from the time it started. I'm very, very well aware of Esther Crawford." But Mr. Renetto, he's acting like he's an important man because he has access to Esther Crawford, and he suggests that Esther Crawford, who works at Twitter now, knows somebody who possibly has the phone number of Elon Musk and stays in touch with him. And he seems to elevate Esther Crawford a little higher than what she is. Well, there used to be a guy on the radio years ago, Paul Harvey. In his segment on the radio, used to come on in the afternoons, it was called The Rest of the Story. So he would take stories and then he would tell the backstory of them. And then at the end of his segment, he would say, "Well, now you know the rest of the story." Well, please, folks, let me give you the rest of the story about Esther Crawford. Here, you will see Esther Crawford. That's her in the sleeping bag, laying on the floor at the Twitter office building. She's been there for the past few days. If you're not aware of this, Mr. Renetto, apparently Esther Crawford has left you out of the loop that she's included everyone else in. She's sleeping on the floor in an office, one of the offices at Twitter. I don't know if you could read that or not. I'll read it for you. When your team is, Esther Crawford says, when your team is pushing round the clock to make deadlines, sometimes you sleep where you work. When you need something from your boss, Elon, at Twitter. You see, Esther Crawford isn't on the phone with Elon Musk. She doesn't discuss things with Elon Musk. She's simply a team leader. And actually, she's a team leader of what's called Twitter Blue. And I'll show you this. Hopefully you can see this. I'll read it. In case you can't, I'll read it afterwards. I'm going to hold this real still. Can you see what that says? I'll hold it up there for you a little bit. I can't tell from where I'm looking because the screen I'm looking at doesn't indicate to me whether that's legible or not. I can just see some lines of writing, but let me read it. According to messages viewed by the Times, Ms. Crawford, Esther Crawford, works on Twitter Blue, a subscription product that faces a November 7th deadline for rolling out, or those on the team face termination. I will alert you that November 7th is tomorrow. This is why Esther Crawford is laying on the floor in a sleeping bag at Twitter. Because Elon Musk is the boss. He's not on the phone chatting with Esther Crawford or with somebody else that she knows, and much less with Renetto. No. She's got her orders. She is merely one small cog of many cogs in the Twitter wheel. Elon Musk has given them their walking orders. They're marching orders. What he wants done, exactly how he wants it done, and exactly when he wants it completed, which is November 7th, tomorrow. And if it's not completed, she's going to be kicked to the curb, just like you were kicked to the curb by every woman who's ever been in your life, Mr. Renetto. Every woman. Not a lot of the women, not most of them, but every one of them. And Esther Crawford is going to be kicked to the curb if she doesn't meet the deadline that Elon Musk has mandated. See, so you can't use her as a as a segue into saying that you're an important man, because you had once worked on a project with her, some nebulous project, wherein you were attempting to make the world a better place. Now let me get to just one more thing. You said, Mr. Renetto, when you looked at my video reply, you said, oh yeah, there's a lot of good comments under it. People saying, glad to have you back, glad to see you back. And that's not unusual. I always got good comments under my videos. Then you said something else about, towards, I don't know, the last few videos that I made on YouTube, that there was some sort of problem. No, there was never any problem. There was always probably about 90% and positive comments to the 10% negative. If that, it probably was more than 90%. And then you talked about my Twitter account, and you even put in the title of your video, at Mr. Greg Solomon is hated on Twitter, but you conveniently left out the fact that my positive comments under my tweets and my DMs, direct messages, and likes and upvotes outnumber anything negative by at least 10 to 1, probably 15 to 1, which I think is just a commentary of the climate, the political climate nowadays. What I'm saying just resonates with people more. So you just have a small percentage. The only reason I took extra precaution with that package, I mean, back in the time when Ted Kaczynski was operating, there was a whole bunch of people around. There was only one Ted Kaczynski, and that's all it takes. I could have 10 to 1, 15 to 1 positive comments, but just one nutcase, and there's a lot of nutcases on the other side right now. Just one of them. So I took precautions. That was what that was all about. But now, talking about a case of the pot calling the kettle black, this is another screenshot I got from Mr. Renetto's YouTube page. This is a sign that Mr. Renetto's next door neighbor put up on his fence to greet Mr. Renetto every time he leaves his driveway or rides into his driveway on his Twitter, or on his senior citizen trike. Let me get this just right here. I'm not angling this right. I don't want you to miss any of it. You see that, folks? Take a good look at that. Get a good gander at that. You see what that says? That's Mr. Renetto's next door neighbor. Look at that sign. Take a good look at that sign. That's not something that a guy just took a piece of cardboard and sprayed some black spray paint on it. No, this neighbor took this out in his garage or out in his workshop. He put some work into that sign. Put some work into it. Well, he used stencil. Heck, he was probably filing the edges, getting all the burrs off it, making sure it was just right. probably even put a coat of wax on it to protect it from the weather. But this is a fella that he went above and beyond making that sign. Now, on the other hand, I don't have any neighbors around me that have a sign up like that. Matter of fact, for the entire time that I've gone through this thing called life, I've never had a neighbor put a sign up like that. And yet, Mr. Renetto, who is busy with projects to make things better for people, seems to have no idea how to make the world a better place for even his next door neighbor. Look at that. That says it all. I don't really need to even give any more commentary on that. I mean, that says it in a nutshell. So every day when he comes up in that senior trike, he's riding down the street. He turns and he rides up into his driveway, and then he sees that on the fence. That's what greets him from his next door neighbor. And any women that he's had contact with have kicked him to the curb. Kicked him to the curb. So, well, to quote Anton Chigurh, or to paraphrase Anton Chigurh, you should admit your situation, Mr. Renetto. There would be more dignity in it. You see, Mr. Renetto, when you point a finger, you have three pointing back at yourself, as I have just pointed out to you. Until next time, everyone, this is Greg Solomon saying take care.